All right, Pat, season 4, episode 3, entitled Breaker of Chains. Man, these third episodes, they are just getting more and more jam-packed as we make our way down the line.
Yeah, Dom, I think the Talkin TV family probably agrees. This is Breaker of Minds, right? With these third episodes.
For real. For real.
A lot happened. Amazing way to follow up the Joffrey wedding, and it is definitely a wild ride.
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. All of that and more on tonight's episode of Talkin' Thrones. God, that was awesome. Oh, man. We have another doozy of an episode. I don't really know when it was that Benioff and Weiss adopted this strategy of kind of splitting up the majority of the action, you know, as far as the setup for the characters between the first 2 episodes, and then kind of really seeing, like, you know, kind of the whatever the next stage is after, like, the initial setup. I forgot what, like, that exact point on, like, the writing structure is. They have pretty much have that in their third episode, but for whatever reason, they feel the need to jam pack all the storylines into one. It's really strange. Like, I don't know. What are really your thoughts on that as somebody who has, like, actually written for film and television before, Pat?
You know, hey, listen, I think for the TV show, it's a matter of, like, shock and awe. Like, very big shocking event happened at the end of the last episode, which was Joffrey basically dying in Jaime and Cersei's arms, like choking on poison. And you know, how do you follow that up? Well, you know, it's sort of like that movie Halloween 2, like the original, and how it's
I was about to say, I'm like, which one?
Well, I think they, you know, every time they do a Halloween 2, they try to do the same thing, which is continue the story, right? You know, the latest ones, I think, did that.
Well, at the very least, the latest.
Rob Zombie had an homage to that. So.
Right. Well, it's the most confusing thing, because at the very least for the latest Halloween movie, right, they actually, like, give it a subtitles, or almost, so it's not just another Halloween 2, it's Halloween Kills, you know? It's ironic because the first one of those is already confusing enough with the comparison to the original name. But yeah, it's so confusing because you have the original 1981 Halloween 2, and then I literally have to call the 2009 Halloween 2 Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 in order to justify those.
Well, they're just going to keep rebooting these, you know.
Yeah, it's true.
David Lynch is still, if David Lynch is still alive in like 10 years, he'll be able to reboot the series himself.
David Lynch's Halloween, I would watch.
Yeah, I would love that.
Because you know why? Because David Lynch would actually, like, delve into, like, the weird surrealistic, and, like, he'd make a whole movie, like, inside of Michael Myers' head. It'd be really weird, but it'd be really surreal and awesome.
Anyway, this is not a Halloween Michael Myers episode.
Not a Halloween special.
And the only reason why I brought it up, Dom, was the fact that this episode takes place right after the events.
Yes.
We're in the middle of the action, and I think that gives some credence to the pacing of the episode, because, you know, our hearts sort of, like, dropped last week, and now we got a little bit of sweat, goosebumps. We're ready to see what happens and where the story takes us. And I think the pacing of this episode really gets you into that mindset. And I think that's really the sort of sense of the cliffhanger, and doing it this way is that you waited 7 days if you were watching this in real time, or if you're streaming it now, you're basically like, hey, I'm clicking that button because I got to see what's next. Either way, your heart is elevated, you're ready to go, and I think there's something with that. You know, don't give them everything. Let them build anticipation that really works with this, episode 2 to episode 3.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because the way that the episode starts, it's almost like I don't think any other episode has done this exactly to the point where it starts off actually with literally a retake as part of the episode of the ending shot of Joffrey. I love the opening shot. It's like right on Joffrey's corpse. It's like just adding that little edge to it. It's like, oh yeah, just one more shot to show you that guy that you absolutely hated is dead. And then it just plays out the sequence as it happened last episode, where it's Cersei yelling at the guards to take Tyrion and all that before it cuts to Sansa being taken away by Don. It's very interesting. I don't think any other episode of the show has started off that way, like from a structure standpoint. But
well, I think it's it's also to make it a standalone episode. Like for whatever reason, if you jump into the show in the middle of it, let's say I don't know why you would do this, but season 4, episode 3 was the first episode you saw of this show.
could have just
You
been
could
happening
basically-
like in the old like scrolling through cable days.
Yeah, you could pick right into the action. You can understand what's going on. Like you might be some disorientation, but you would basically be able to get the entire scene and understand what's happening. Some sort of killing happened at a wedding, and then you would learn who, to a certain degree, Joffrey was and whatnot throughout this episode. Like they do refer to the fact that he's not a good king. He's sadistic, etc. So, the characters do pepper in some plot points about Joffrey that you would be able to pick up. So, I think replaying the scene, it's sort of a little bit of a tradition in terms of, making sure the audience members, whether you were included in last week's episode or not, you could flip this on the television or just walk into a room with your roommates watching it, and you can sort of understand everything that's going on. It's a self-contained episode for sure.
That's fair. That's actually pretty fair and actually really interesting. And so we cut to this brief opening scene with Sansa and Littlefinger. It's another one. It's another one again, like begins like dovetails with a scene, ends with a scene because there's so much that it has to cover. But I like that we get this little check-in with Sansa because this really is the beginning of phase 2 for Sansa. She's finally been able to escape King's Landing, which was originally like this place of, great enlightenment and like futuristic destination for her. And now she's wanted nothing more than to get out of it because it has slowly drained away everything. And now here's her chance, but it's in the hands of Littlefinger. And in Littlefinger's hands, Sansa is molded into like a completely different figure. So like this is, again, talking about how season 4 is kind of the beginning of like almost act 2 for these next couple of seasons that we're about to cover for this phase of the show. The other thing that I love too is the fact that of just how like Joffrey's wedding, similar to kind of how you saw with Ned Stark's death and Robb Stark's death, but I'll actually make a different comparison rather than those two because those are two end of season events. Joffrey's death and like kind of all the ripple effects that kind of play out from it reminds me very much more so of actually Renly Baratheon's death all the way back in season 2. I think it's ironic because they were also making a ton of references to that in the previous episode. So the way that Renly's death, right, and the way how that happens at the beginning of episode 5, and then you see the ripple effects of it like all across the kingdoms, that's kind of what this episode reminds me of more so rather than any of the other previous events. And I think it's amazingly well demonstrated here. Once Sansa is spirited away into Littlefinger's hands, Littlefinger immediately responds by killing Dantos. It's like, wow, good on you for actually trusting Littlefinger, but I guess that shows. But as he responds, and the interesting thing here too is that he doesn't reveal yet to Sansa that he was behind it, even though by this point us book readers knew because this was the point that he revealed it in the in the books. And then of course he has the response of all responses when Sansa asks why he killed Dantos, and he's like, because he's a fool and a drunk, and I don't trust drunken fools.
Yeah, Tom. So I would say like he kind of does reveal it to Sansa in the sense that he tells her about the necklace and that he had it made like 3 weeks ago. So I would say like in his own way, he kind of subtly reveals it. Sansa, who hasn't had the best track record up to this point of putting 2 and 2 together, it's whether or not she actually understands what he's talking about. But, maybe to a certain degree, that's part of her journey now is to get up to speed. And really, she's always been behind in terms of the moves that are being played in the Game of Thrones. And this is her chance to sort of be with Lord Baelish and start to observe sort of his skill. He's very malicious, as with Dantos and killing him. He promised him $10,000, like 10,000 gold, to be able to spirit Sansa onto the ship. And that, I think, for a man that was a knight who had presumably some money, maybe some, land, etc., to be stripped of that and made a drunken fool in Joffrey's court, to have Lord Baelish offer him $10,000 and help him get back on his feet. I think, that's something that he's really desperate to do. Like his fall from grace probably didn't sit well for him. And, you just dangle that carrot in front of him and basically Lord Baelish was able to utilize him as much as possible. So I think this whole experience with Sansa, like, she might not know how deep Lord Baelish's role was, but I think she's going to start to understand, like, how he played a long game and, how, she could start thinking a couple moves ahead to her advantage. But that development for Sansa is going to happen over time, over definitely a few seasons.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think it's a great way to open the episode, and also a great way to kind of signify Sansa's journey about what's going to happen. But let's get to it. Again, even though it's only still a small fraction of the episode, King's Landing, that is where the action, that is where the drama is again this season. You have Joffrey's wake. Man, the other thing that I can say about King's Landing, Tywin is wasting absolutely no time. He's like, okay, one son's dead, I got to start prepping the next one. And he's already got his almost like the long Lannister claws just wrapped around Tommen's Tommen's shoulder, not even paying attention to the one grandson that's already like just laid out in front of him with those weird rocks over his eyes. I still don't understand why they do that at Westerosi funerals. I've completely forgot the custom that goes with that. I'm sure that if I brought in a Game of Thrones fact checker, Eric, that he would be able to point that out to us. But
yeah, I'm pretty sure, obviously a lot of the show is taken from real history. So, I wouldn't be surprised if you could, search that on Google and find an answer for yourself, Dom. But I don't know myself, but otherwise I would let you know. But, it is definitely a burial ritual, or adapted ritual. I think this scene's amazing in terms of, just how, Tywin approaches the scenario. Like Cersei and Tommen are hanging out over Joffrey's body. Tommen doesn't really seem to, be distraught. Cersei's a little more so, obviously, because it's her children and that's what she's living for. But effectively, Tywin is using history and, Tommen's, naive nature to really make his points and bring him under his wing. And he's talking about like, hey, what do you think makes a good king? And, it's like strength and, justice and all this stuff. And every time that Tommen answers, he brings up a logical argument of why that didn't work. For the guy that's sought justice and reforms, it wasn't really just for him to get murdered by his brother, right? He let that happen. He let the kingdom fall into a dark rulership. So, the problem with justice was that, he was blinded by, basically from that scheme. And so Tywin brings all these things up to direct him towards wisdom and the fact that wisdom comes from listening to your counselors until you're of age. And then, the best kings basically listen to them well beyond, their childhood years.
Yes, absolutely. And like the way that he's like subtly coaching Tommen towards the right goal by pointing out all these examples. I will say that like besides being it shows like Tywin's prowess as a manipulator and the reason why he is the most powerful man in the Seven Kingdoms and has been for the last several years. But also I can't imagine, it's like, wow, he actually probably would be like a really good teacher just in general. I just imagine like Charles Dance as Tywin Lannister teaching a class of like a bunch of like college students today within the metaverse. I'm like, wow, he might actually produce like some pretty efficient college grads right there. But
yeah, well, maybe that's it. Maybe the future of education is like in some sort of virtual reality where I could be teaching my video editing class as Tywin.
Wow. Hey, that's an idea right there.
That would be really bizarre, but
yeah.
Hey, anything's possible. The technology is out there. It's just a matter of will you put the effort in and investment of money.
Exactly.
But anyway, that might be actually a good short story or short film idea if anyone wants to take that. But Tywin is the master manipulator. It's just amazing. And he's not wrong. I think that's where this all comes from. It comes from truth. Yes, he's manipulating him, and he's going to try to make Tommen do the moves that he wants. Yeah, I almost messed up his name. But anyway, so it's basically Tywin. He understands how people's minds work, and he's leading him to the conclusion, and he's going to make it seem like Tommen is making his own decisions. And, that's going to be how he manipulates and lays the foundation for his family going forward beyond the events of this tale. Tywin totally expects to live, probably like another 30 years giving, his grandson advice. And the fact is we, have people that have seen the show understand that doesn't happen. But the fact is, he's playing the long game. He's setting Tommen up to listen to him as long as he's alive. And also, if you do have a couple decades with your grandfather teaching these things, those things are going to be ingrained in how you decide to do things in the future. So, he's basically, definitely, like you said, trying to educate the boy in, his design, the way he thinks things should be, and influence really the way that the Lannisters rule from, hopefully for generations from Tywin's point of view.
Right, of course. And now the next scene that we have here is an interesting one because it was kind of the first of a couple of controversial sex scenes that happened on Game of Thrones. Like, of course, Game of Thrones has been criticized for minute one by like the lesser ones crowd about being too violent and too sexually explicit. But this is the point where we started to get into like the uncomfortable areas, let's say, we kind of within that sphere, in the sense of where what happens afterwards is when Cersei and Jaime are foolishly left alone. This seems to happen a lot in the set, just Jaime and Cersei being left alone just at random points, not even just like, when they accidentally wander into their chambers or whatever at night. But basically, Cersei begs Jaime to just kill Tyrion, just get it out of the way. He's been a menace to our family since minute one, and this is finally our chance to get rid of him. And Jaime refuses because he understands that there's no way, because he actually, knows Tyrion and understands there's no way that Tyrion actually would do this. And what follows is something that's very strange, where it's a scene that I think was I don't know for sure whether it was explicitly changed from its presentation in the books, or whether, as far as our interpretation of it goes, or whether it was intentionally reshaped to be something that was not, which is where the reason is that in the books, because this is played out from Jaime's perspective, we're perceived to see the sex scene that follows, which it's already strange that they're having sex next to their son's corpse, but whatever. It's Westeros. It's medieval times.
Well, also, yes, it's very awkward that this is the moment that Jaime chooses to take action, in regards to their secret incest relationship that probably shouldn't be public. And the fact that it's in the sept, even though they told, everybody to leave them alone and let them have the room, I know it's not like 2022, there's no video cameras anywhere, but, the fact is there's got to be people that are hanging out in the hallways and whatnot that can easily peep into this giant chamber room and see what's going on. So for, the way we're looking at this scene, one, it's just a weird spot to confront Cersei in general, just because there's already rumors, but now you're basically just
now they're just doing it out in the open. They're just like, we don't even care.
So I think that yes, there's kind of some missing psychology to the scene in the show, because it's like, we understand that Cersei has sort of moved on and said like, hey, our relationship is not what it once was. You took too long getting back to me. She's sort of, the relationship is pretty much ended, in regards to their intimacy. And, this is the moment where he feels he's been punished. And so he just goes ahead and, from my perspective, takes what he wants. And unfortunately, she begs to stop, and he assaults her right there in the sept. So not only is it, part of their, incest relationship that's been going on for, years, there's multiple children involved in this relationship. Now it's, escalating to really this violent area, and it's being done publicly in the sept. And, from my perspective, it's like the implications are like, oh man, you just sort of like, signed your death warrants, like, someone's going to hear about this. Someone's going to be able to, put a witness in a stand, and, it's going to lead to some very dangerous Game of Thrones action. Now, whether or not, that really is a storyline that's followed, I don't really think it is. But, it's kind of a weird scene in that regard, because you would think it would lead to a lot of, obvious consequences for this scene taking place.
Yeah, it's a weird scene to begin with, and the only reason why I think it was intentionally changed is because even though in the book it takes place from Jaime's perspective, when it actually happens, she's full on enjoying it and asking him for more in the books. And I can read you a passage and show you exactly what it is that she says, and by all intents and purposes, it is meant to be perceived that it is a mutually consensual act. versus in the show, the intentionality has changed, and I'm still not quite sure why as far as the decision, especially considering that, okay, so she refused him, but she also initiated the kiss as far as like perhaps an attempt to seduce him and get him to do her bidding this way. That's kind of the only reason why I can think, just as far as the choice to change it to me is confusing, unless it went along with their previously established kind of slight change in narrative. But again, this was a section that got such small little devotion in the books and was also kind of executed differently in how it was shifted in the books that followed A Storm of Swords. But only
I think it really only serves to show that their relationship is on the rocks, that they're not on the same page.
Yeah,
that they have diverged. They once were a unit. Basically who pushed Bran out the window, and they were okay with it. They were okay with I guess siblings that murder together, stay together.
Siblings that murder together, stay together, die together, have some kids together.
But but the fact is, they're basically no longer kind of one mind. And this is really the point in the show where that will continue for seasons on end. Jamie is seen as this sort of like honorable person. Like, that's a shift from the first two seasons. Now he's, for the rest of the series, has some sort of honor. He obviously names his sword Oathkeeper and, interacts with Brienne throughout the rest of the series. They've changed our perception of him. And that's going to last for the series. And as time goes on, leading up to Cersei eventually sitting on the throne a couple of seasons from now, she's basically getting more and more hardened, more and more cruel, and more like her own type of ruler. And the fact is, Jamie is not going to be able to sway her in any regards. And I think this is like basically an early on notion of like, Jamie and Cersei just not being able to reconcile with each other. And the fact is, the Lannisters are, their families being torn apart just as much as the Starks was, in terms of the events of the first couple seasons. And, it's just basically it's mistrust and cruelty and violence, and this is things that are normal for the Lannisters. These
are now happening to them.
Yeah, these things are heightened, and they're doing it to each other because they can't turn off, the scheming. What has got them to the throne. They just can't shut it down. They're paranoid that even each other is somehow screwing themselves over. It's now personal ambition, and it's kind of the family tragedy, I guess, going forward for the rest of the show.
Right, indeed. And I think it's interesting that from one Tywin confrontation, kind of coaxing towards something to another, we next have Tywin's confrontation with Oberyn, which again, like, it just might be one of the best written scenes of the entire series, let alone just this season. Like, he walks in, Oberyn's in the middle of yet another brothel like encounter that seems to just be like that's like his kind of his base of operations that he's made since coming to King's Landing. And that like the kind of the cat and mouse back and forth game that's by there, it's Shakespeare. It's first Shakespeare. I think that works out because I just watched The Tragedy of Macbeth on Apple TV Plus this weekend, which was probably like my first real like actual thing. I'm like, okay, this is Shakespeare, not Baz Luhrmann's bullshit with DiCaprio. I'm like, this is Shakespeare. And like kind of that cat and mouse back and forth, their intentions through their body language, but they're not actually being spoken in words. Tywin basically kind of coaxing him towards like, oh, okay, you could have done this, and Oberyn being like, okay, no, I didn't do this, but this is where we're gonna go with this. And like it's poetry. I don't know, Pat, what's your take on it?
Hey, listen, I think you laying the smackdown on Baz Luhrmann might be a little bit of a problem.
Oh, no.
Listen.
Oh, we got a Baz Luhrmann stand here?
Listen, his Leonardo DiCaprio and Romeo and Juliet I wasn't necessarily one of the people that loved that particular film, but Baz Luhrmann is amazing. Was it Moulin Rouge, The Get Down, which is on Netflix?
Okay, that's fair.
He's done a lot of things. Like I think he did Australia, which was
Yup.
very visual, beautiful movie. I don't remember anything of the plot. Maybe it's been way too long since I watched it. But don't throw down the white glove when it comes to Baz Luhrmann, because he actually is a really good filmmaker. But the fact is, in this particular scene, Oberon speaks plainly with Tywin, and it's the same thing that he did with Tyrion when he came by the brothel earlier in the season. He says why he's there, and that's to get revenge. He tells Tywin, hey, listen, you're responsible for the mountain, and you basically had something to do with this. And Tywin denies it. He basically says, hey, no, there's history is full of people, under orders who disobey and do cruelty. And that's what happened in this case. And so Oberon responds at face value. Okay, well, the fact is, I'm going to have a conversation with the mountain. And, this means a duel, this means a murder, whatever. Oberon, is smart enough to understand that he can't just go straight at Tywin. And even says so. And the fact is, he has to take Tywin at face value, and the fact that his real objective is the mountain. And that's a beautiful setup. That is what's going to take place later in the season is obviously the second trial by combat that Tyrion is involved in, and Oberon is going to be his champion against the mountain. So there's sort of the whole entire season weaving this confrontation, the whole entire time in almost every episode. And I will say that, in this particular scene, Tywin is playing politics. He's trying to rig the jury in his favor. So two of the judges, Pycelle, I believe, and Tywin, they're going to vote.
Mace Tyrell.
Yeah. Well, oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
so,
Mace Tyrell, not Grand Mace.
Okay, Tyrell.
Wow, I just realized that's another one that sounds like almost identical.
Yeah. So anyway, so basically, the Tyrells, which they want the alliance as much as Tywin wants it, so they're obviously going to vote in the same way, to convict Tyrion. And really, that's 2 against 3. So Oberon's just serving, to hopefully be convinced as a outside party, and really bring him into the fold. You'll get a seat on the small council. You'll be an advisor in this administration, so to speak. So there is a trying to make a multiple family alliance between the Dornes, the Lannisters, and the Tyrells. And this is maybe a foolish attempt by Tywin, but for the time being, we're left with Oberon staring down Tywin as he offers his hand. And we're going to learn about his decision at a later time, because right now we got to cut to Tyrion in the prison cell, enjoying his time that he has to think to himself.
Wow, sounds like so much fun, and they're not giving prisoners any books, anything to do, it's not exactly capital punishment, so he's just sitting in that dungeon cell with time to himself. He finally gets his first visitor, the good old loyal Podrick Payne. Which
Podrick bought wine, but that got taken from him. But then he got some duck sausage, some ink, some paper, like all this other stuff. He was able to sneak through past the guards, but the wine, that was the number one thing that he couldn't bring into the cell.
Yes, indeed. But again, like Tyrion, unfortunately, is not in a position to be able to enjoy his luxuries. He has to take what he can get, and he first immediately asks Pod to go and find Jaime for him. The other thing also being that that Pod reveals also is that he was offered a knighthood to testify against Tyrion, and that he turned it down. And it's so admirable that like there's actually like one decent person still in Westeros, considering the fact that he's loyal to Tyrion, the other only decent person in Westeros, and Tyrion immediately realizes the potential of what could happen. He thanks Pod for his time and dismisses him from his service and tells him to get out of King's Landing for his own safety, which is
because,
quite rather necessary.
The fact is, if they offered him a knighthood to testify against him, that means, when he said no, that means they want to get him out of the way, that they're going to do some sort of murder scheme to get Podrick out. And, Tyrion might be a little paranoid at this point, but he is in prison about to face a death sentence for a crime he didn't commit. So the fact is, Podrick, is a target now that he refused to testify for Tyrion. Tyrion understands this, and Tyrion, says like, hey, you're under direct order to save your life because there's nothing I can do from within here. My hands are in the fate of my family. So Podrick, save yourself. And that's a direct order. So, I think that's, basically the two of them have this relationship where they're looking out for each other. They understand the chessboard, so to speak. And the fact is, Podrick has nothing left that he can do to help Tyrion. So the only thing that Podrick should do is look out for himself and make sure that he saves his own life.
Absolutely. Yeah, things are indeed heating up in King's Landing, but that's not the only place that things are happening. We're going to make two quick stop-offs before we get to the other major sources of action. So that first one being on Dragonstone. Stannis, unlike last season, Stannis is getting pretty like a lot of decent screen time for the first half of the season, kind of establishing where he's going to go next. And, oh, man, Davos' decision to let Gendry go last season is not exactly boding well for Stannis.
Yeah, Stannis is, he's like, hey, you're a literary man now. Read this, Davos. and basically
straight up like pointing a middle finger to him. And again, you gotta be thinking that it's like, wow, so I burned these two stupid leeches. Now not one but two of my enemies are dead without me having laid a finger on them. So Stannis and now Davos, consider the fact that Davos let go like the source of that sacrifice. Like Stannis is just living right now.
Yeah, so Stannis is basically, I told you so, that the magic is real. And Davos has, basically, he can't refute it. And he says so. It's like, I can't refute it. The magic is real, but you can't rely on the magic, right? We need to actually look at the logistics, figure things out. We're going to need men and money to solve this problem and take over the kingship. We should talk to Braavos, we should, whatever. Stannis brings up the thing. It's like, we don't have men or houses that can bring men to our cause. We don't have money. We don't really have the things that we need to be able to fight this war. And Davos, you're my, hand of the king here. You better figure it out. How do we do this? And that conversation doesn't really go well between the two of them. And Davos is, left, to his own devices. He goes and visits,
Shireen.
Shireen. And, basically they have a reading lesson that they're going to do. And Shireen has picked this book about one of the first knights of Braavos or whatnot, first swords, right? Mm-hmm. And essentially they start reading it, and, Davos starts telling a story about the difference between a smuggler, and a pirate. And, the fact is, if you're a famous smuggler, you're not doing it right. And, he launches into this whole deep story about like how he told someone this, a rich lord, and they couldn't understand the difference. They almost killed him because, pirates and smugglers are the same thing to, people that are affluent. And he, starts thinking about why this is so. And it's because, they really don't, they have a lot of money to the point where the nuance is lost on them. They don't understand it because it's so small that they couldn't possibly, care to figure out the differences between it. And this sparks an idea that's not really pays off in this episode. Essentially, it's going to pay off as we go through the season. But the fact is, he gets Shireen to write him a letter that he's going to send, presumably to the Golden Bank,
Iron Bank of Braavos.
Yeah, the Iron Bank, and he's essentially going to play a trick of his own to get some support for Stannis and his war effort.
Yes, indeed. And I love the part too where he has Shireen do it, where he's like, look, you're a better writer. In order to kind of tie it off, he's like, look, you're a better writer than me. I'm going to stumble over the letters and it's going to take forever. And he tells her exactly what to write. It's like I love that little pair, that little duo.
Yeah, I think
the two of them.
Yeah, I think the chemistry between the two actors, throughout the series really does work. I think everybody's casted well. Davos is clearly, one of the best characters of the show. From start to finish, when they first introduced him, all the way to the end of this show. He just has that realism. Okay, this is what you want to do. Well, I'm telling you, these are the logistics. And no matter what the scenario is, it's like I understand that Melisandre has magic, but magic alone doesn't win wars. That's can only be used in a certain manner. So he's able to compartmentalize, a lot of these crazy things that are happening in this world, and he's able to rethink, replan, and relaunch whatever journey they're going to go on to a certain success. He's very adaptable, and that's what I think we like in his character. And I think the fact is that Shireen, having to write the letter for him, she even says, you're not Stannis. Why am I addressing this as if I'm Stannis? And it's because he wants to catch attention, and his name carries a lot of weight. And I think, this scene, speaking about great writing, there's a lot of care in this scene, and I think it really does set the Stannis storyline on a good page going forward in this season.
Absolutely. And speaking of another sequence in which we get a brief stop off with characters that just continue to emphasize, I'll say, kind of the survivalist aspect of this world, right? We have another stop off with Arya and the Hound in the Riverlands. It's the famous scene where they're arguing. They find that farmer that, what's it called? The later of which we see the payoff for in season 7, I think actually really well so done, where...
Yeah, how they eat that soup is so disgusting, man.
Oh, it's nasty.
The Hound,
but that's how you can tell they haven't had food for weeks. That's how you can tell.
It's great visual storytelling because at the beginning of the sequence, Arya is going around picking radishes and kind of pensively eating them, right? It's kind of like radishes, whatever, but she needs to eat something. And then when they get to that soup, it's kind of like a Marx Brothers routine, comedy routine, kind of screwball comedy, where it's the father and the daughter are well, we got to pray first. We got to do this. And it's oh my God, all I want is that soup.
Yeah.
And so at one point...
But it pays off amazingly well later on, though. Yeah. Obviously, once we see the result of it, where Arya walks outside in the morning, the Hound has knocked out the farmer and he's robbed him of literally all of his gold. And she's like, why? And he's like, this is a game of survival. That guy's not going to make it. And it's kind of a harsh reality check, but once again, kind of continuing in Arya's story, just the consistent role models that are constantly saying, do not fall for emotion, do not feel anything. Prioritize survival above all else, because that's what this game is. And I think it's
he's not wrong, because, the farmer says, hey, I'll hire you to stick around and help me with the farm and also protect us against, these raiders. And that's really what the Hound's talking about, is this guy has been beaten up and paying the raiders that have come into his, home, his farm, and taken things. And that's where it's he can't even protect himself. So the fact is, the Hound could stay there and he could, effectively help him. But what's the motivation? It's likely that the Hound, depending on how many raiders there actually are, could get killed, defending this farm for, some soup and, potentially some silver. Whereas he could just take that silver and move on his merry way, bring Arya to, basically her aunt, and sell her and have gold and silver and be able to, as he says in this sequence, basically, stake his passage to Essos, to become a sellsword and live that lifestyle where he could fight for money and, maintain a certain lifestyle that he's accustomed to as a knight in King's Landing.
Right. And unfortunately, that does not happen here, as the Hound right now is only primarily concerned with just kind of the next stage of their journey and kind of, stepping over every innocent bystander. But now we head to the North, Castle Black. Big, very important episode as far as kind of setting up the stakes, both of the future of Castle Black in this season and this show. We have the first scene with in the field with Ollie. little Ollie, who we're introduced to, that ends up playing a pretty significant part in the next couple seasons. His village is attacked by the wildlings with the fens. Egret, we even see the shot specifically where Egret's arrow pierces his dad's neck. And I love the snap zoom there where it's like, hey, keep this in mind for later on.
I think this is, again, another good scene because
good scene. It's a really good episode.
He sees the violence happen to his parents, and then basically this guy comes over looking like a witch doctor, like very like the cannibals, right? They sort of look like this very scary, tribal group, and the shaved heads.
The way
and
that
everything.
he just so viciously sits next to him and says, "I'm going to eat your mother and your father." Run along to the crows. It's it's scary stuff.
Yeah, listen, the cannibals are scarier than the White Walkers at this point.
Oh, for real.
In the show. So
it's almost like the White Walkers saw them coming and we're like, we're sitting this one out. You can have this.
Listen, I really, it's a kind of a missed opportunity because the cannibals don't really last too much as an enemy in the show. They could have done something where they kind of kept coming back and harassing Jon Snow and whatnot. But the fact is, the group is really well done, and the fact is, it makes the scene very easy to remember where Ollie comes from because not only did his parents get killed, but you had a man who taunted him and said, "I'm going to eat both of them," and if you think about it, that's for a child, that's going to be traumatizing.
Very traumatizing.
Probably as traumatizing as watching Ned Stark lose his head. So Arya and Sansa are traumatized for life by that. And they're going to want revenge against the Lannisters no matter what. Lannister's evil, that's it. There's no convincing them otherwise. It's kind of absolute evil in their eyes. And I think that's the same thing with Ollie. Maybe Ygritte's, killing of the parents, maybe that could have been justified as a raid. That kind of happens in wartime. This is a little bit of war. But to have a creepy guy tell you that he's going to now devour your parents' dead bodies, that's absolute evil. And Ygritte is actually tied to that in Ollie's mind because she's the one that initiated the death of her parents or his parents.
Exactly. It's a great setup for what happens later on in the season because, again, as we all know, Ygritte unfortunately dies at the end of this season. And in the books, it's just a random arrow. But the fact that we get some characterization around that, as well as kind of how that ends up kind of inflicting more damage on Jon and what that sets up, I actually think that from a story standpoint, the Ollie character is actually handled really well. Just the fact that he's really is more of a plot device than an actual character. But even still, the background is all there. And
we don't want him to do what he does, but
right.
Story-wise,
it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense.
It's one of the most tragic love stories, in television because it plays out over several seasons, and it's hey, everything looked great, but exactly what Ygritte told Jon, it doesn't matter. Their relationship is the only thing that matters, and the two of them, decide to pick their sides over the relationship, and that's pretty much what leads to them never being able to be together, because death separates them. And, it's because, literally they couldn't come together and just focus on themselves. They had to think about the bigger picture.
Yeah, exactly. And as if Sir Alistair's hatred for Jon wasn't enough, it finally does boil up in this episode where it's revealed that Ollie heads straight to Castle Black, gives them a direct warning saying, look, this is happening. And this finally gives Sir Alistair the ammunition they need. It's okay, this is coming. We need to prepare for war here. And it also coincides with Sam, who says that, is obviously worried about Gilly with the amount of, men that are very desperate since they've kind of been all ordered to not leave the castle now, until the fighting begins, since they're in an active war state. Sam obviously worries for Gilly and kind of ushers her away to Molltown. She's not okay with this because, Because, he swore that he would never leave her. And even though he's trying to do this for her own safety, she doesn't get that because she still thinks that the safest place is by him. But
I think she was better off in Castle Black.
Yeah.
Damn, it's he takes her to Molltown and it's she'll cook, she'll clean, she'll take care of the other children. It's pretty much only thing she gets in return is room and board. And it's so basically she becomes like the slave at the innkeeper's. And everyone keeps referencing like there's other work, right? Which is, prostitution, right? That's a big sort of business in this world. And it's like, nope, no other business. We're not going to handle that. He's basically just trusting some random innkeeper to allow her to do any and every chore as long as it's just chores. And it's kind of a weird spot to leave her in, considering, it's like, do you really know who's in Moletown? At least you kind of understand the situation at Castle Black. It's a bunch of, I guess it comes down to, who they are, right? These are thieves, these are rapists and murderers, etc. So Castle Black is almost like being in a prison, where people are allowed to roam around freely. But what is Molestown? Molestown is sort of this,
it's like this ramshackle town that's kind of only there to like service the Night's Watch.
Yeah, it's on the border. It's like, probably destitute families, like crimes probably there. It's not exactly like a shining light of, justice to go back to that scene with Tom and Tywin. But the fact is, what makes her safer there than at Castle Black? Because, there, the sort of members of the Night Watch can sneak out of Castle Black. That's a reference that's been made the whole entire show. And they can go to Molestown, and, that they have less repercussions if they get away with something in Molestown than if they do something at Castle Black. So, I think it's Sam being a little misguided, not really thinking things through. Like, his intention is there. He really wants to protect her, and he floats this idea, hey, listen, like, I think it'll be safer there, considering the upcoming war. But I don't think he's thinking through all the factors. And I think, unfortunately, the situation, no matter where she is not going to be really any safer one way or the other, in my opinion.
Right, exactly. And it's followed by, again, the capper scene for this entire storyline. Two people who we haven't seen, quite frankly. It's funny because when I thought about it, when I watched this episode originally, I realized, oh, wow, these characters haven't been around for this many seasons. They've been missing for almost an entire season since their last appearance was the 4th episode of last season, at Craster's Keep, but they've officially been let go or been able to escape. It's never really specified. Gren and Ed are back. Dolores, Ed, they arrive back at the wall. And they inform them of what's going on at Craster's Keep. The mutineers that killed all the other loyal Night's Watch members have now officially shored up there. They're living it up at Craster's Keep, and that they're not planning on going anywhere. They've kind of made that their new home, their new kingdom, per se. And John realizes that's a problem because if you also remember from last season, he lied to Mance Rayder's face about how many brothers they had at Castle Black. And Mance, at least for the most part,
over 1,000, right?
Well over 1,000, well over 10,000, something ridiculous like that. Yeah. And John realizes, wow, these mutineers will be the key to Mance realizing that they don't have that many numbers, and it'll just cause Mance to attack them like even further. So they realize that that unfortunately, for better or for worse, the mutineers, again, in an original storyline that did not happen in the books, and again, I will give them credit, the original storylines they had this season in order to supplement the material, really well done for the most part, because like they said, these mutineers could unfortunately be the key to their undoing, and so they need to make a move on them and kill them.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like, I didn't read the books, but the fact that you're telling me that a lot of this material did not take place in there just shows you, their understanding of the world and the characters that they have in play. And the fact is, they can craft storylines, they can cast really good actors to come in and play the parts, and like, I think the Craster's Keep storyline, is one of my favorites because it really helps define the North and like, just how hard it is to be at, Castle Black. And there was a reason for them to mutiny in the first place and kill the Lord Commander. And it just really characterizes everything and fleshes things out and gives you a sense to really care for what happens up there.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's a really compelling setup for kind of the midpoints of the season when they go on that quest to Crasser's Keep, and I think it's actually like, surprisingly enough, like an actual like compelling like wrap up of that storyline, which is a storyline that is still completely left untied really in the books. You know, we never really check back in with those guys. For all we know, they're still there. You know. But that leads us into our last storyline of the episode. And again, the title of the episode comes from a Breaker of Chains. It's where Daenerys officially earns another nickname to add to her litany of nicknames. I swear, by the time we get to those last 2 seasons of the show, she's got more nicknames than Apollo Creed of all people. They arrive outside the gates of Meereen. They officially, you know, the Meereenese have heard about her conquests of Astapor and Yunkai. They're ready for her. They send out, it's a Meereenese tradition, they send out a single rider. You know, they do single combat before they officially go to war. You know, Daenerys looks down her line of like, who will represent me? You know, Jorah, Barristan, Grey Worm, and she finds reasons that all of them should not go out there because she needs them and values their advice too much. And Daario offers himself up. You know, it kind of, I'd like to think of season 4 as being one part Daenerys officially solidifying her conquest, and the other half, you know, Daenerys, Daario, you know, rom-com.
Yeah, but
that's kind of how I categorize it.
So Lord Barristan, right?
Barristan, yes, for Barristan.
Yeah, so he makes the best argument of them all. Listen, no one in the world has won as many single combats as I have.
It's true.
You know, like he sets himself up to be a confident, amazing man. And she's like, yeah, but I need some protection, so no. You know, but it's like, this is the guy. Like, if he's going to make a message,
right?
You know, he needs to step up and do it.
The craziest part is, again, even more so bringing it back to the books, it's not even Barristan in the books either. It's not even Daario in the books either. It's another character that they just completely chose to cut out, which is a character that was Sir Barristan's bodyguard when he first met with Daenerys, because he was masquerading as somebody else for a long time. It was actually a former Meereenese slave fighter named Strong Belwas, who, again, is a character that does not exist in the books at all, in the show at all.
Well, books have the pages to, you know, build up some cool death scenes for characters. Film and television, unfortunately, you know, hey, if you introduce a character, you're kind of stuck with them. Right. So merging them together, you know, and consolidating storylines, you know, does definitely help with movies and television. But what I will say, regardless of the choice, right, you know, and who goes and does it, you know, Daario has this great plan. He's just going to stand there. He's just going to stare the guy to death, right? You know, it's the guy's charging on a horse, you know, full spear, ready to go. And Daario just stands there. And then he starts making out with his dagger, like, you know, and blinking towards.
Hey, man,
you know,
I'm hearing a lot of shade towards something that completely works. Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
And then he's blinking towards, you know, Daenerys, like, you know.
He's showing off, man.
Yeah. And then, you know, obviously it's revealed what he was thinking. He just like flips the dagger right into the eye of the horse. It collapses. The guy falls and tumbles right in front of him. The dust clears, and all of a sudden his sword is coming down and slices the guy wide open. He's dead. Everyone in the city of Meereen is shocked. And then he basically, you know, there's no good way for me to put this, but he returns the favor and whips out his own piece, and, you know, does piss on the ground as, you know, the previous challenger did, basically mocking the message Meereen was sending to Daenerys. And so, you know, there's a little bit of, you know, tradesmanship going back and forth between the rulers during this scenario. And I think it's, you know, definitely a clever scene, you know, a little graphic, you know, or explicit, I guess. But the fact is, it's, it just leads to the fact that, you know, it's an inevitable situation, right? The two sides are not going to bend to each other. And the two sides are proud, witty, and, you know, they know how to handle themselves. And, you know, at this point, Daenerys, to get the upper hand, basically brings in
the ultimate message moment.
Yeah, she brings in these catapults to basically start barraging the city. But, you know, instead of just like loading it up with stones, she loads it up with barrels, and she's catapulting the broken chains of all the other slaves that she's freed into the city of Marine.
Right.
And we're left with a very powerful image of a slave picking up the shattered chain and really contemplating, should I rise up? And one of the masters or, whatever, rulers is behind him, and he's really concerned.
Yeah,
and
it's
then
one.
Cuts the credits.
It's the ultimate signifier of what's to come. This was another action-packed, jam-packed episodes. There was scenes happening all over the place, really showing kind of where the story for this season is going to go, and it nailed it. And it ends on probably one of the best notes that you could get. As far as like comparing like the action-packed episodes of the last couple of seasons, I honestly, it's between this and it's between this and then episode 3 of last season. It's between this and episode 3 of season 2, What Is Dead May Never Die, between like the two like action-packed, jam-packed third episodes of a season. But that was it. That was our review / recap of season 4, episode 3, Breaker of Chains. We'll be back next week for episode 4, Oathkeeper. Pat, pleasure to have you as always, man. Where can the good people follow you?
Hey, listen, you can come and find me here on Talkin TV. I'm Talking Thrones with Tom. And like I say, I every week I keep saying, look at my Instagram at Patrick W. Huber. I'll one day post on it. I swear. I was actually listening to this webinar today about NFTs, and I was thinking about, what happens when Instagram, you post to it? Could they claim ownership of your images? And because of the terms of service and everything. So I'm curious about this new technology and how Instagram works. But hey, maybe I'll post one day. Get over my paranoia of posting.
Hopefully it'll happen.
In ownership of images,
Hopefully it'll happen sometime soon.
Yeah, but the fact is, that's where you can find me, and yeah.
You can, of course, follow me at Movie Nerd Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, at Official Talkin TV Podcast on Facebook and Instagram for the official Talkin TV stuff. We update that every single day with all the things we have going on. Be sure to check out David and Chris's excellent review and recap of the first 3 episodes of Peacemaker, as well as our review of episode 4 of the Book of Boba Fett. We've got all of that going through the rest of January into the beginning of February, all just to signify all of the new stuff that we have going for you guys coming for the new year. And as always, remember, 12 seasons in a short film, and watch more fucking movies and TV.
Yeah,
See you guys next week.
Break more chains.
Talking Thrones.